this section is how to interview clients for content extraction. Honestly, like probably the most important thing we do, because it is like the beginning of everything. It is something that is not easy to do. You need a lot of practice to get good at this, a lot of intuition. Yeah, and it's just something that I've gotten good at by doing it for 15 years, right? Like give or take. But and so now my job is to try and like codify what it is that I do, so that everyone else can follow that and start to like, you know, come up with their own spin on it, but you know, have some guidelines to follow. And so that's kind of the job of every course creator, right? It's like we've got to try codify what it is that we're teaching, and then come across and so that others can replicate that.
Yeah.
So this is a working document of my process for let me actually just say a bit more clarity. I'm going to run through these points. Let's try to not jump ahead. I know it's going to be hard because you can't actually turn these into, I can fix that. Turn into toggle. Okay. Oops. Okay. So I'm just going to use this as like as a discussion point, a discussion document basically, so that we'll just run through these various steps and have a chat about them. I can see you guys on the screen here. Can you see each other still? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So a lot of this came from talking to a client of mine, Khalid Halim, who's just been an incredible resource to us. And he helped me sort of think through like what it is I was doing well with him. It is hard because it's like this stuff just sort of comes naturally to me now. So some of it might not be clear. So you guys like where we're at, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Like let's fill in the gaps together. Okay, so what I realized, like, so basically there's like a really good starting point for all of these types of discussions. Then there's the power of follow-up questions. Momentum is sort of related to that. I may move those two around. What do I mean by intuition? How to build up intuition? Idea sequencing. So you'll see this comes much later. The big thing I'm starting to realize is to not worry about the order of things right away. Just let the conversation go free flowing and just in all sorts of different directions. As long as you have high level buckets that you're wanting to focus on, so you don't go way off piste, but so the sequencing comes a bit later, and we'll get into some of these others. Okay, so the all important question is, what is your transformation? Okay, so this is actually, we'll add to this. So this is, there's like sort of two parts to this. And this is for the learner. This first.
Hello.
You're on mute, Andrew.
I think.
I lost you guys. Sorry about that. Did you stayed on? Could you still talk to each other?
Yeah, we could hear each other.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I wonder what happens with the video, but we'll see the recording. Okay. Can you? Yeah, I suppose you can't see my screen. I'm going to redo that. Okay. So this first part is a little bit up here, is a little bit less relevant for companies, but it's still like, it might be worth let's just go down this path quickly and see if it is. So what I found with an individual person, like they're the expert in something, so all the knowledge is in their head. And so sometimes this might be the case in a company where like there's a subject matter expert. They have to, and this is where it'll differ. when an individual's creating a course that they want to put out into the world, they have to go through a transformation themselves. And I found this like myself, and when I was talking to Khaled, he felt an example of this. He was very anxious about, he's used to one-on-one and like in-person and face-to-face stuff. So he's very anxious about turning his ideas and knowledge into something that people would consume asynchronously. Yeah. Just like talking to a camera, like he was it struggled with that, and he had to get over that. So that was his transformation. And so like related questions are, what are you becoming in making this course? What are you leaving behind? He started to see like he was like going from being a guide, someone's like guide, personal coach type thing, to like kind of more of a guru, where it's like you're trying to teach a lot more people. And that was also uncomfortable. And he had to acknowledge that. What are you leaving behind? What do you know that? So these are just like examples of ways you can ask the same question. What do you know is emerging in you that you need the courage to share? Who do you know you are that others don't know that you need the courage to share? And so basically, like the idea is that the emotion in you is what will emerge in your students, whatever that, so if you're feeling that anxious anxiety about it, it's going to come across in whatever you create, and that, so we have to like address that up front. He said this other really cool thing to me, which is you are the upper limits of your students' experiences. So if you aren't like transforming yourself, then your students aren't going to either. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. And yeah, so just to transform you have to, by definition, you have to leave something behind. There's this really cool concept, I don't get too far off track, called liminality, which I'm just starting to research, which is this, I think this image here is the best for it, which is this, like, you go from the unconscious subliminal then to the conscious supraliminal, and then there's this liminal. So it's basically like it's that like no man's land between like not knowing something and knowing something. There's this like gap, and that's the part, like I think we've talked about this before, the dip that students go through in every course. It's like, am I learning something, or this is so hard, I don't think I'm learning something, or like that is something that happens in every course. So I think just thinking about that and having that at the back of our minds is helpful.
It's also kind of like the spot where people just don't finish online courses.
Yes.
Like you get to a spot
That's exactly it.
It's either too hard, or you don't have time, or something comes up, or you make the excuse. I don't know whether that's subconscious or conscious.
Yeah.
But it doesn't.
No, it's resistance to that it's your reaction to the resistance you're feeling, like what, like I don't. So I think that's helpful to keep in mind. I think as we talk to clients that are subject matter experts, we could maybe ask them about what it's sort of their experience, like how did they get so experienced, what have they done well, what were some of the things that were challenging and they were anxious about. So it's that kind of thing. And then for the learner, it's like, it's the same thing. What is the transformation? Why is this thing not, there you go. What is the transformation? And this is, we have stuff somewhere, I think you might have seen it in onboarding, about jobs to be done.
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of what I'm getting at here. So we won't go too much into that, but it's like, some examples of it is, so it's the statement like, by the end of this course you will be able to what is that thing? And that thing isn't always the most obvious thing. I'm trying to think of an actual example. So with Uconnect, so we're helping them create, we're helping their clients are people who run career service offices at universities. Their ultimate job is to help students who from like all sorts of backgrounds, that's accessibility is a big part, get access to career knowledge and opportunities, et cetera, so like education about that. The vehicle for it is their tool, their platform, which allows you to bring in information and like put it as like a social platform and get people talking and stuff. So, but the transformation is not that. The transformation is like connecting with your students, right? Like being able to inspire people to get new jobs and people who didn't know this stuff existed, and like that's the transformation. So that's that. Then what is the vehicle for the transformation? Would be the sort of second question. I don't know if I described that well enough. Does that make sense to you guys? The difference between the transformation and the vehicle for the transformation?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I visualize it is that the course is based. The whole thing is we're putting together some kind of a guided journey towards a specific destination.
Yeah.
And those questions that we ask about how we get there, how do we create that transformation, how do we reach that destination, that actually it basically becomes the course, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Because each little bit along the way is moving you forward or making a change or embedding some knowledge that's going to cause that transformation or get you to that place of application or whatever the end goal is.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I visualize that vehicle versus versus transformation, sort of that distinction. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no. What did you think, Michelle?
I think we've spoken about this before, just ever so slightly, with the continuous conversations video. Like every single course or script, for that matter, everything's a journey, and you have a starting point, and just like our process, it's exactly the same. Whether you're writing it or whether you're taking the course, it's a journey. I may know nothing about what I'm going to write about 2 weeks prior, but I will know it 2 weeks later.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also like jotting down things that didn't make sense to me while I'm going through the content is pretty much my journey and my pit stops as well. And kind of using those as focus areas, because if I didn't understand it first time, chances are whoever's going to do the course is not going to understand it first time either.
So true.
I love that.
It's like full circle.
So bookmark that thought. I want to come back to that in this section. So I think that's a useful practical thing to add to this. I love that. So I think we've captured that, right? So like transformation might be to inspire your team to perform above their current capabilities. And the vehicle would be learn how to give good feedback, coach and delegate tasks, right? Like specific things like that. Okay. Okay, so now we'll come back to, so the challenge is, I'll start all calls like this, but you have to now keep the conversation going and keep the momentum going. And the best way to do that is to shut up, listen, let them talk, and then ask really good questions next. And let them talk. And don't worry about, well, first of all, don't put any words in people's mouth. That's like a big thing I've learned as well. So let's just add some of these ideas here.
You have to step in with minimal assumptions.
I love that. Exactly. And let them do the talking.
I think a lot of the time, probably 90% of the time, these initial conversations, the client sort of knows what they kind of want, but they don't really know what it is, what that whole thing is going to look like. They don't really know until those wheels start turning, until they start verbalizing all the briefs and the meetings, connecting the dots, all of those internal conversations that they're having, that they are now processing in real time with you. That the pieces really start falling into place, and then you can only really start asking questions, because then they have their own context. be able to frame those answers in a much more coherent way than us necessarily walking in with a list of questions and like answer this, answer that, answer that, answer that. Because you're not going to get, in my experience, I find that we don't get to those nuances and those little sticky bits that really make things special and actually get to the core of what you're trying to achieve. But also on a very sort of practical level, you're not getting to the actual purpose of what they're wanting to do, because it becomes a checklist, and anybody can do a checklist.
Exactly.
To create a transformation, you have to understand really, all those nuances and all those little bits that come out quite organically.
I love that. I was just going to use that word. I love that. Let's maybe put that in here as well. These conversations must be organic. Too much preparation creates a checklist approach. So I look at it as like the transformation that you talked about in that first question becomes the canvas for everything else. So then it's like, okay, it's cool. So now that's the thing. So we want to inspire people to perform. We want these learners to inspire their teams to perform above their capabilities. Okay, so how do we go about that? What's important? So giving feedback is a problem. Okay, cool. So now we dig deeper into feedback and we go down that rabbit hole. And then we come back, well, what else? Back to the canvas, right? What else is important? And then you go down that rabbit hole and you just follow your curiosity. Essentially.
That's so interesting. So I just finished writing a module on effective interview techniques. So this is kind of falling into place with things moving organically. So the last lesson was advanced probing techniques and how to use combination questions to get the evidence that you need, right? And as you're speaking, all I can think of, and probably because I finished writing it this morning, all of those things are fresh in my mind. But the thing is, you have to leave them to have an aha moment of their own in your presence and let all the pieces fall where they may. And you have to physically sit there, listen and go, that's interesting, and pinpoint your moments that you can already see what your lesson's going to look like. So you're listening to them, they're talking, you're like, you have an aha moment at the same time as them is your first prize. When everything comes together while you're in the same room, brainstorming without knowing it's brainstorming.
I love that. It's like a mindset thing. It's not this part here actually we talked about earlier is so key. Like if you over prepare for this, you shoot yourself in the foot. You're not ready for these conversations. Like I never go into these things. I will talk about prep because that's sort of, I think, the intuition part, but I never go in with preconceived questions. I never write out questions before. I go in prepared and I've read the material. Like I know what the subject's about, but that's it. Like I'm just going to come up with questions in the moment. I'm going to almost say here, like, trust yourself to prepare well by knowing the content, but not planning questions. And our checklist may have questions and stuff, so we should really look at that and see whether that's maybe something that's like misleading for people.
Our checklist is very vague though. So you know sort of the areas that you want to talk about, but it obviously really depends on the context and the content that will be discussed. I think we're okay.
Good.
I think also, I think having sort of those like framework questions, so not necessarily questions that you're going to verbally ask, but just have them sort of in the back of your mind, so that when you are having those conversations, that penny's dropped. Note that down, so that when you after you've had that call or that conversation, and you're going through the checklist, then okay, well, look at that those 2 questions have been dealt with. That section we need a little bit more, so I think that guiding framework is really helpful. So I mean, you don't want to start from completely scratch. I think having a little bit of a framework is helpful, but definitely not sort of that. I think in sort of, it's called the checklist, but we shouldn't view it as a checklist in that context.
That makes sense to me. Okay, so I was just capturing some.
Customize it.
Yeah. So I was just capturing some thoughts. So listening for what's interesting, I love that, sort of those aha moments, and then following your curiosity to ask probing questions. I'm going to sort of take this term you just used, framework questions, and be like, we can maybe just identify a few of them. I think this is one I really like to do, is as a follow-up for an aha, is go, so what becomes possible because of this? Because that person's just been like, oh, so then you just get a whole nother rich vein of thought that you can tap into there. Another one is sort of to ask the ridiculous. So you can, this is to like kind of help them. Like you can go like to the extreme to like get them to come to, rule out the extremes, basically, to help them like narrow their thoughts on that. And just, if you do that, just preface what you're doing, use them to rule out the extremes. So an example of that is, this is the example here. So if someone asks you like, hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? Like that could be, when someone asks me that, I get like, well, geez, I don't know.
Yeah, nothing. I'm not hungry.
Yeah, right. It's like, it's quite a paralyzing thing. But if they're like, do you want pizza? Then you've now got like you can either go like, yes, I definitely do, or like, definitely not, rule that out. And now your mind's like primed to start thinking about what you'd want in its place.
So I think you've just given me a life lesson for personal life, because my partner does the exact same thing. I'm going to try that and see what happens.
See what it works. See how it works. Yeah. So that's another helpful one. Okay. So building your intuition. So first of all, I want to add to this, because this is what, so do your research into the topic. Cannot stress this enough. Like when we had this Uconnect thing, and it's about like digital engagement and stuff, like go and read up about that. Go look on YouTube. There's tons of free stuff. Like understand what this concept means to enough to be able to ask good questions. And then, Shah, I want to come back to your point, which was to make a list of questions you have. So I want to sort of like, you don't have to know everything. That's the point, because learners won't, right? Like, so those questions, these questions lead to content for the course, right? So like, so you're the engine of this whole thing when you guys do this. That curiosity is something that other people are going to have. And of course, it's going to be a subset. It's not going to cover the entire set of questions people have, but that will pick up as we do more and more research, interviews and testing of the course. But you're going to get a huge chunk of the way there by like, just what was confusing to you? What do you want to know more about? What was interesting? So I love that idea of just making those questions. So this is sort of jumbled in a bit of a weird order here, but this is, here's what I'm hearing that you're not saying. So I find this helpful to use when like you think it's sort of like you have an assumption that's like popping into your head, but you want to confirm it. Or you're not like sure that that's what the person's saying. So you can say like, here's what I think I'm hearing. So maybe let's just here's what I think I'm hearing that you're not saying. So use this to confirm your assumptions that pop up during interviews.
I use the correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this
one. Exactly. Another great example. Let's flip it like this. So it's rather just be prescriptive, confirm your assumptions that pop up. And this is one way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think you're saying is something like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I often go with so what I'm understanding from what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, is this right, or something like that? Yeah. So that's a good thing to like just always also have in the back of your mind is don't basically like, I think the thing is, yeah, don't leave interviews with like open assumptions.
Open questions.
Yeah, questions and assumptions.
Or head-scratching moments.
Yeah.
Like,
you don't like, and Stratton has done this a bit in Uconnect, and we talked about it, him and I, because he didn't want to look. He said he didn't want to look dumb, or he didn't want to like look like he didn't know what it was. But like I said to him, that's the point. Like you're not the only one who's going to think like that. So you need to address that on the call, because it's so much harder to try and like get context and like follow up in an email or whatever. So you have to confirm them as they pop up.
I think going in, you have to make peace with the fact that you're going to be learning just as much as the person that's going to be doing the course. The company or the client didn't go to an SME to write a course. They went to a learning company.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not going to think you're stupid. They're going to think, okay, these people are thorough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a powerful position. It's a powerful position to be in if you let it be. Because it puts you firmly in the position of the user. That's your context. So yeah. The other thing that I always find really helpful and that I find my most successful sort of talks with SMEs are when they are driven to ask questions. So I suppose my question then is how not every SME is going to be, or every client is going to be necessarily interested in understanding the process, how we do what we do. No, they're not going to get, like in the weeds with us around like how we can approach things. They want to leave that all to us. But to get buy-in from them, I think it really helps when they also get excited about what we're doing. So I suppose I'm asking, how can we drive that? How can we nurture that excitement in the client for what we're doing? And get them to ask those questions.
It's one of the
I try and ask them like, what's I always ask. I mean, what I like to ask is, why is this a passion point for you? What makes you excited about this content or this topic, or what's your favorite subgenre or subtopic of this, or what's the biggest change that you've experienced, or like success stories, whatever. So I try. That's how I try and drive it. I don't know if you have any other tips and tricks, any other approaches.
I think that's what I was getting at with this part, which we'll come to in a sec. So that's a very valid question. Let's make sure that addresses it. Just before we jump to that, and then we may have to stop there and then pick this up next week. But the last thing on building your intuition is, and this applies like to when just yourself, when you're like going through it on your own, and also in the conversations. And this is straight out of, this is not my words, but this is from Khaled, but search out the spot with the most resonating energy. So it's like, and it's specifically useful when the client's stuck between two things. So, it's like, because a lot of this stuff is also like, they don't know, right? So it's like, okay, what is the best way to do this? Or what should we cover here? So one of the things he recommends is sort of imagining yourself in the state, like, thinking between those two things. So let's try and make this practical. Like, imagine yourself in a state. So, I don't know, let's say it's like a coaching conversation or something, right? And we're like, well, what would be the best way to address this issue? And so imagining yourself in that state of that coaching conversation, he then recommends you actually break the state by saying, like, you quickly ask them, like, so what's your zip code backwards? So like their brain has to, and there's actually like I forget what it is. There's like a thing, like a neuroscience thing for this, but so they like quickly like what, and they go through that, and then okay, now let's imagine the other state, and so now Gene has two parts. So the person could do this or they could do that, and then say, okay, so you're like in the moment feeling it, like, okay, should they do this? Okay, how does that feel? Okay, cool. Wait, what's your zip code backwards? Oh, okay, do that quickly. Right, now let's imagine the other state, like, how does that feel? Okay, now which one had the most energy? Like, which one felt right, basically? And at that point, yeah.
It's like a mini reboot for your brain.
Yeah, it gets the synapses firing in a different direction, and then you have to sit back and
bringing emotion into it. Like, what is that? Like, what does it feel like if you picture yourself in that situation? Which one feels right? Like, generally, one will feel better than the other. Like more. One will just feel right, whatever that means to people.
Like asking a person like 20 questions really, really fast, and you have to like say the first thing that comes to mind. And then you slot in the question of making the decision, and the person's meant to just answer like that.
Exactly. priming the brain. Yeah. So this actually, I don't know if it fits under building your intuition, or maybe it's actually keeping the momentum going. All right, we don't have to worry about that now. Let's just close off here just to make sure we address Sarah's point there. So I think always keep the momentum going. I think two things that I do here, and it sort of, I feel like helps with this, like keep them passionate, remind them why we're doing this, is first of all, orientation. So let's say orientation, remind them where they've been, where they're about to go. I do this all the time, and it's like, it sounds super repetitive, but if you're working through a course map and you're on like module 2 and you're about to go into module 3, I will go and like and I'll do this like multiple times during the same call, give a recap saying, okay, cool, so we've just finished this, the learner's just done this and this, now and we're trying to get them to this ultimate goal, like the next step is this thing. And so like so you're constantly like orientating them in that flow of the course. So yeah, I just do that all the time. That helps set the context, shared understanding, and then keep the bigger picture in mind. Kind of related to it is like, and why is this step relevant, and that's that next step relevant, and like the connection between them was because the broader thing is we want people to improve the performance of their team, or whatever the case is. Do you think that addresses what you were raising earlier?
It really does. I think helping them remember sort of within the context of what we're doing is really helpful. I think for me, it's really important that the client and or subject matter expert remembers why they are doing what they're doing. And keeps that top of mind, and what are those special little points, I think with any type of learning, I think it's really important to remember that it's a person on the other side who's going through this transformation, and to keep on making that connection for the client, or the SME, to say, okay, you know all of this, and it might be sort of a little bit boring to you by this point because you've been doing it for years, or it's been in the cycle for however many years it's been, but come back to what's important, what makes it special, what do you enjoy about it, what have your experiences been, and how do we translate that for the user at the end, so that they have a transformational experience, that they walk away with something. So for me, that orientation, whether it's an emotional orientation or quite a practical orientation about where you are in the development and the design and what the whole thing looks like, is really crucial.
Yeah.
Don't get bogged down by the technicalities and the logistics of a course. You are not doing it. Someone else is doing it. Making sure that 5 million pieces of information are in a 2-minute video does not make it interesting for the person that is watching it. They're going to see it as a chore rather than not noticing that they just went through a 5-minute video and thought it was rad.
Exactly.
I love you. It's my biggest qualm. Remember who you are doing this for, guys. Not to impress anyone, it's to inspire people.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. I think we've captured that well, and I actually do feel like this part that we talked about this thing fits here, because it's like if you get stuck, then it's this process. So we don't need that anymore.
It's exactly what we've been going through with Pinterest, because they worked on the content for so long, like over a year before we even saw it. They were just so done.
Yeah, they were over
now
it.
Now that they started seeing things on Rise, they're getting excited again. There's smiles, there's laughing. Like the energy within the client calls is completely different because they're excited again about the content that they produced so long ago. And it makes such a difference.
That's such a reward in itself, hey?
I know.
Just that little bit of change that's been affected is really testament to a job well done.
Absolutely.
Okay. I imagine the other state if you went down. Now that makes more sense. Okay, cool. So I think that's a good stopping point. We've got, the sort of starting point, the all important question, and then follow-up questions, building your intuition. This might actually end up coming first, because that's like, a lot of that's like the prep work and that kind of thing. Keeping the momentum going, and then idea sequencing. That's a good starting point, because we'll pick that up next week, where it's more about it's the organizing of everything you've heard. You, like this huge brain dump stuff, and now it's like, okay, how do we start to put that in order? So let's pick that up next week. But this has been great, guys. I really enjoyed doing these little processes. We're like creating something together here.